Welcome to Date Night with Martina. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Martina Hughes. I started Tantric Blossoming around 15 years ago. So creating Tantric Blossoming for me was an opportunity to serve women and men to be more connected to their bodies, to open in their hearts, and to embrace their sexual energy. And over the last 15 years, I've shared this work through private sessions, workshops, retreats, and training. And nowadays, a little bit more in the online space because that's what our time currently calls for. Tonight's topic on Date Night Live with Martina is all about sexual desire. I feel that sexual desire is one of those topics that is not very well understood in its fullness. It's something that is often suppressed or projected. We often make other people responsible for our desire or our lack of desire, and yet our desire is part of our own health and well-being. So that's why I wanted to speak to the topic of sexual desire and hopefully paint a broader picture for you around sexual desire, your responsibility with your relationship to your sexual desire, and using that as a barometer for your own internal aliveness as well as your own health and well-being. So throughout the evening, do feel free to say hello in the chat box. Let me know how you are, and if you have any questions, please drop those in the chat box as well. If what I'm sharing resonates with you, also let me know in the chat box. If you're unsure about something I'm saying, also let me know that in the chat box. By you sharing into the chat box, we get to have a mutual, a shared experience. So there's that sense of relating as a community, even though the spoken word is only one way, but we get to have a two-way experience via the chat box. So yeah, please do share and ask any questions in that space. Good evening, Peter. Hi, Danny. Hi, Nina. Michael is asking if men and women meet one another tonight or on another online activity that I do. Yes, Michael, it is possible, but that's date night for singles, not in this space. So date night for singles is on the last Saturday of each month. It's 5 to 7:30, and in date night for singles there's a little bit of sharing and group discussion at the beginning, and then we go into some partner activities in breakout rooms. So then you're allocated to a breakout room with a partner, have some sharing and discussion, come back to the main space for some more group sharing, then some more partner activities. So have a look on the website, tantricblossoming.com. As I say, it's the last Saturday of each month. It's just $35 to join. So that's what you're looking for in terms of meeting people, Michael. Thanks for that question. Good evening, Greg. Lovely to have you here again. So it seems we've got a few regulars dropping in, a few people who are here each Wednesday night, and yeah, it's really beautiful to feel the community of people that's been growing and emerging around this particular sharing. Okay, so let's do a short meditation. If you'd just like to make yourself comfortable and gently close your eyes and begin taking some deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. In through your nose and out through your mouth. And as you breathe, I invite you to scan your body. And as you scan your body, become aware of anywhere that you're holding tension. Tension is commonly held in the jaw, the neck, the shoulders, the back, the hips, the groin. So as you scan through your body, just inviting your body to release the tension. Imagine relaxing the jaw, relaxing the neck, relaxing the shoulders, the back, the hips, the buttocks, and the groin. Deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And connecting in through the center of your body, through your heart, through your belly, down into your genitals. And as you make this connection through the center of your body, I invite you to feel into your sexual desire. And as you feel into your sexual desire, becoming aware of whether your sexual desire is low or non-existent, becoming aware of whether your sexual desire is quite high, or perhaps it's just somewhere in the middle, noticing what your relationship to sexual desire is in this moment, knowing that it might change throughout the evening or throughout your week. But if you were to give your sexual desire a number out of 10, with 1 being non-existent or low, or 10 being very high, what number out of 10 would you give your sexual desire in this moment? And then once you have an awareness of whatever that number is, bringing your awareness back to the Facebook Live space, opening your eyes, letting go of the meditation. So the first thing I wanted to speak to tonight in terms of sexual desire is why sexual desire gets shut down. And there's 4 quite common reasons, and some of them are interconnected. But the first reason for sexual desire to be shut down is sexual shame. Sexual shame is very, very common and happens sometimes in obvious ways, but also it can happen in quite insidious ways, almost covert. There can be a sense of picking up even on some of the family, societal, peer-based cues around sex when you're quite young, and shutting down out of sexual shame even when we're children. That's certainly been something that I've unraveled, has been an early shutdown around sexual shame based on something that I wasn't even aware was happening for me at the time. So Sexual shame plays a big part in our society today. And there's a tendency when sexual shame is present in the body, there's a tendency for the body to become quite numb, quite dull in its sensations. And when the body is numb or dull with sensations, when there's a lot of sexual shame, there's a tendency then for the sexual sensations to only be active in the genitals. And often those sensations are only active through hard, fast, vigorous sexual interaction. So when somebody's body is numb or shut down because of sexual shame, there's a tendency that they need sex to be hard, fast, and strong, and lots of high intensity activity, let's say, in order to feel something. However, when somebody is, let's say, free of sexual shame and more connected to their body, then there can be sexual aliveness and sensation felt throughout the entire body. So the more sexually aware you become, the more sexually sensitive you become, then there's the possibility of feeling sexual aliveness and sensitivity throughout the entire body. So that's something that we want to be able to move towards higher levels of sexual sensitivity. One, for our own capacity to feel expanded energy, to feel more aliveness, to feel more sensation. The more we tune in to feeling more sensation, being able to hold higher levels of energy in the body, lovemaking can last for longer periods of time. We have a deeper capacity to tune in to our partners. There's a possibility then that sex goes beyond the physical act and into some of the energetic and spiritual spaces. However, when sex is very much focused on genital sensation and a lot of friction and high intensity activity, then there's a limit to the pleasure. And what happens when there's a limit to the pleasure, it's like, let's say, if this is the full range of sexual openness, sexual expansion, sexual connection. If sex stays in the physical realm, it means that we're just skimming off the top of what's possible. There's this whole range here that remains untapped. So when sex just stays in this shallow realm at the top, where it's all about the physical sensations, where it's all about friction and high intensity, there's a whole lot of journeying that is not available to people who are just engaging in the physical expression of sex. So when sexual shame is present, it can lead to people being quite driven around sex. There can be a drivenness to have more sex, sex more often, more variety, more intensity, in order to relieve some of the pressure that builds up behind the sexual shame. So sexual shame can lead people to either shut down, or it can lead people to be quite driven around sex and looking for sex as an outlet to this pressure internally. How many of you watching can relate with having experienced sexual shame throughout your life, whether it was as a child or in an adult relationship, or even becoming aware that it's something you've internalized from family or society that you live in? Hi Fergus, lovely to have you online. Hi Chops. I wonder if Chops is your real name. Okay, I'll just pause for a second and see if there's any reflections on shame. Shame's an interesting one actually to ask a question about because, of course, shame itself is the kind of thing that really lives in the dark, and it can be quite hard to bring shame to the surface, to share publicly that you experience shame and sexual shame in particular. But we have a couple of brave people, Nina and Danny, both saying that yes, they're familiar with sexual shame. Robin says, excellent explanation, thank you, Robin. Yeah, so sexual shame can have a really big impact on the way we show up in our relationships, the way we show up sexually, and also our expectations that we place on our partner. Melissa also says she's experienced sexual shame. Yeah, and sexual shame can be very painful because there's a sense that sex is what we're made from. It's what we're born from, and it is an innate part of our beingness. And so when sex is made wrong, there's also a sense that who we are as people is made wrong. So sexual shame really goes to the heart of who we are. And for most of us, there'll be some experience or feeling of sexual desire at an early age, either as a child or as a teenager. And when we don't have vocabulary or understanding for what that sexual desire is, it often leads to sexual shame and a sense of like, oh, there must be something wrong with me. I feel this intensity. I feel this energy. I want to express this. But if we don't have the vocabulary or the capacity as children to understand that, that in itself can lead to sexual shame. Chop says, my mum used to shift in her seat when there was a movie with deep kissing. That rubbed off for a long time. I was shut down. Yeah, definitely. I've experienced very similar chops, and that's the way in which sexual shame can be passed on very unintentionally. But of course, when we're children, we're very sponge like and we absorb the feelings and the experiences of the adults around us. Danny's trying out his Italian. Buongiorno, Fergus. Okay, so we've spoken about sexual shame. So that's one of the reasons that sexual desire becomes suppressed. The other thing that I see quite common is that there will be something emotionally out of balance within the person. The person may have past hurts, past resentments, around sex or past relationships or current relationship that they haven't taken care of. The person might be feeling stuck in their life. They might be feeling disillusioned. It can be the case for men that if they're not on track with purpose, then they also shut down sexually because they are not expressing their purpose. Then it can be the case that everything else kind of gets shut down and held back. So that can also be another reason for sexual desire being suppressed, that there's something out of balance internally for the person. There's something that they're either stuck or they're not addressing, they're not expressing, they're not releasing, and that energy has an impact in causing the sexual energy to shut down as well. The third element is that there's something emotionally out of balance in a relationship. So, emotionally out of balance in the relationship might be that there are conversations that need to be had that aren't being shared or expressed. It might be that there's a build-up of tension between the two partners. It might be that there's been some sexual rejection or sexual hurts that lead to that suppression. One of the things that can happen, particularly for women, because a woman's body needs to open for sex, a woman's body needs to open in order to receive. There's a deep sensitivity for women there, because in order to open, when we do open sexually, we're letting a man into the very deepest part of us. And so for women, if she feels disillusioned, disappointed, somehow let down by the sexual experience, then her capacity to open will diminish over time. If a woman feels that the sexual act is just skimming off the top, it's staying in that physical realm and not going into some of the deeper places, a woman will start to feel that there's no point in opening up. And so she starts to suppress and shut down sexually, because it just gets harder and harder to open up. And most of us women weren't taught when we were young to be able to take responsibility for our own opening, for our own desire. So if we don't understand how to do that, then a woman will expect her partner to be continually supporting her opening. And then the fourth element that can lead to sexual desire being suppressed is if somebody is physically unwell. And this could be any range of things, but our libido is quite connected to our overall health and well-being. So if somebody is not in good physical condition, then it's quite common that their libido shuts down. So that may require an overall health checkup to see what's going on. So we have four aspects there that can relate to sexual desire being suppressed. That's sexual shame, emotionally something out of balance with oneself, emotionally out of balance in the relationship, or being physically unwell. When we are physically well, there's a sense that our sexual energy can be expressed more freely. It can move through our body. And some of these things you may need support with. If you have a long history of sexual shame, then that's something you might need to work through with a therapist. It's something you might also come along to one of our events and work on, because sexual shame is a topic that we address at some of our events. If there's emotionally something out of balance within you or within your relationship, that's also something that you might work with, either with a therapist or come along to one of our events or other similar events. Hi Gail, lovely to have you here. Chops says, I resonate with that, which I think was the emotionally out of balance aspects. Chops is asking, would it also be suppressed because of a lack of a partner? That's a really great question. I might leave that until we come up to the next section, where I'm talking about the differences between sexual desire in people who are single and sexual desire in people in relationships, because there are some differences in that regard. Oftentimes too, the opposite of sexual suppression is a burning hunger to have sex all of the time. And this is possibly more, well, I see it more commonly in men than women, that sense of wanting their partner all the time, being sexually hungry all the time. And this is often a little bit difficult for people to hear if they experience sexual hunger, that like really high levels of desire, because there can often be a belief that a high level of sexual desire is it's a good thing and it's natural and it's healthy and that's just what I want. And it is true that people have varying degrees of sexual desire, but in a, let's say particularly in men that I've worked with, but I have also experienced this myself, is that often that sexual desire can have a driver underneath it, and it can have an unhealthy driver underneath it. And that unhealthy driver can be a need for validation, a need for approval. Like, if my partner wants to have sex with me, then I'm good enough, then I'm worthy, then I'm worthwhile. So I know in my case, when I experienced that really high level of sexual desire in a past relationship, and I thought it was, simply because I wanted to express myself sexually, I look back and I can see how there's a really high degree of neediness in that relationship. There was a really high degree of me looking for validation, looking for approval, and almost using sex and sexual worthiness as a way to make myself feel good about myself, but also using sex to cover up some of the other gaps in the relationship. How many people watching can relate to that, using sex to cover up some of the other gaps in a relationship, or perhaps even using sex to try and prove yourself? I just leave a space in case anybody wants to comment on that. Greg has said he was a 10 last night, but after a huge work day today, he's exhausted and only a 3. If he had a woman that he loves walk in, he's sure he'd be a 10 in seconds. Yeah, and of course, there's a difference between our desire when we're single or when we're in a relationship. Sherry says pregnancy has put out my fire. And yeah, that's really quite natural. I know that pregnancy can go either way. It can either cause women to have an insatiable appetite, or it can cause women to not feel like sex at all. And I think it's really, really important to be gentle about that, Sherry, knowing that, yeah, your energy is being required for creating a human right now, and that does require a lot of energy to create a human. So yeah, that can certainly have an impact. And in the case of being pregnant, it would be important to, even if sexual desire is not present, but to build intimacy in other ways, like holding and nurturing yourselves. Gail says definitely. That was in response to my question about, yeah, whether you've used sex for validation or to fill gaps. Danny says yes, he can relate to that as well. Awesome. So oftentimes that sexual hunger, that really high level of desire, it can be a sign of need. It can be a sign of drivenness to cover up the gaps. It can be a sign of yeah, trying to validate yourself. Sherry says she absolutely relates to that. In the past, she flaunted her sexuality to gain attention and validation. The sad thing is she didn't realize she was doing it, and it attracted some very toxic situations and relationships. Yes, I totally relate to that, Sherry, and have done similar myself. Nina says, I've seen it in a friend of mine very clearly. She wanted sex from her partner all the time and he couldn't keep up. Later, I helped her realize that she was covering up everything else going wrong with sex. Yes, I've definitely seen that as well, Nina, and good that you could actually, support your friend with that. Yes, so it's important to have a look instead of just going, oh, my high sexual desire is a good thing. Even just to pause and go, is there a need under this? Is there a driver? Is there some part of me looking to prove myself? Because the thing that can happen with, let's say, with that driver underneath the sexual desire, it can have the effect of repelling the other person. And I see this a lot in long-term relationships where, and this is, again, it's more common in men, but it does happen for women as well. But let's say, thinking of a few situations I know where the man's high desire for sex had this need or this driver sitting underneath it, and that driver creates a hunger, but the hunger then causes the partner to pull away because the partner feels in some ways repelled or overwhelmed, or like there's a sense of demand on her energy. So when she feels that demand, that high level of expectation for sex, there's no space for the woman to open. So if there's a high level of hunger, demand, expectation, then a woman is quite likely to pull away. Going back to what I said before about a woman's body needing to open sexually, in order to open, there needs to be space for a woman's opening. She needs to feel cherished and loved for who she is, not just that she's expected to be available for sex. So when a man comes with a high expectation and a high pressure for sex, then there's no space for her opening to happen. And so then she will pull away. Also, if the woman has felt like her deeper longing sexually hasn't been met, she's more likely to just not even be interested in meeting her partner's needs. And as I say, this can go by both directions, men and women, but that's one that I quite commonly see. Nina says she's felt herself pulling away and that she actually did pull away because of that feeling of expectation. Chop says it becomes like an energy drain. Absolutely. So it's important to move out of that sense of sexual desire that has that really high intensity, like this must be fulfilled, I must have my sexual needs taken care of, I must express myself sexually with my partner. That kind of sexual intensity which has a hunger underneath it is a sexual projection, because essentially what's happening is making your partner responsible for your desire. There's an expectation that your partner will meet your needs. And so in that expectation, in that projection of desire, projection of needs, the person often hasn't cultivated a healthy relationship to their own internal sexual energy and internal sexual desire. So part of the way I like to look at it is that each man and each woman is responsible for their own sexual desire, and being able to cultivate sexual openness, sexual desire, sexual aliveness in their own body, rather than And one of the sexual projections that often comes up for women is, I will open when he does this, this, and this. I will open when he touches me in all of the right ways. I will open when he shows up in a certain way. So that's a woman's version of sexual projection. But it's important for each of us to have access and capacity to feel, to regulate, to move our own sexual energy and our own sexual desires, whether we're single or in a relationship. So I'm going to invite you all into a practice again. If you can, close your eyes and place your hands over your genitals. And take some deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. Breathing down into your genitals. And just imagine that as you breathe into your genitals, you're waking up your genitals from inside of your body, directing your breath, your awareness, the flow of blood into your genitals, creating more energy, expansion, and a sense of aliveness. If in this moment you were to simply say yes to your sexual feelings without censoring, without filtering, simply saying yes to your sexual feelings, saying yes to your desire. Perhaps you feel tingling in your genitals. Perhaps you feel a stirring. And what if you were to breathe that tingling, that aliveness from the genitals through the rest of your body? Noticing what's present in your body, noticing what you're feeling in this moment. And on the scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being you feel nothing at all, and 10 being that you feel a lot of sexual desire, just noticing what your number is in this moment. And then release the breath, release your hands, and come back to the Facebook Live space. And if you'd like to share anything you noticed in the practice or whether your numbers changed, you can feel free to write that in the chat box. I'll just take a moment to have a sip of my tea. I'm drinking a beautiful lemongrass, lime and ginger tea from Madame Flavour. You can order Madame Flavour teas online. Some supermarkets do have them, but I really love all of their teas, but particularly the lemongrass, lime and ginger, and green tea, jasmine and pear. Nina says her number went from 7 to 8, so she experienced an increase in the sexual desire and aliveness in her body. Beautiful. I'll just give you another moment or two to share. For anyone who's wondering where Hades is tonight, he's hiding behind the cushion, sleeping a lot. Ah, Greg drinks the same tea as me. Awesome, you got it at Woolies. Yeah, I have seen it at Woolies, but I buy it in bulk now online. It's just much easier that way than I have a good supply there. So the reason for this practice is to show you that Greg says his number went from 3 to 5. Danny says enjoyable meditation. 6 went to 7, not bad for me. Awesome. So yeah, the reason for this sorry, I've just interrupted myself. Sherry says that was like a little ad break for tea. It was like a little ad break, wasn't it? um, I actually know the person whose business it is, Madame Flavour. So yeah, it was like a little ad for her. She's a lovely person and has created a good quality product. Um, but yeah, the reason for taking you into that meditation is for you to feel how easy it can be to just slow down, connect with your breath, relax the body, take the sensations down into your genitals, and start to move and awaken some energy in the body. It's actually really simple. Now, you may not have been able to connect with that in those few short minutes. It was quite a short practice, but it gives you a bit of an insight into something that you can do in your own time, and gives you a starting point to begin consciously working with your own sexual energy and your own sexual desire. Of course, if there are things like imbalances emotionally or sexual shame, then or you're physically unwell, then of course that might have an impact on your capacity to feel the energy. But the point of the practice being to give you some connection to your body and feeling sexual desire in your body. So I wanted to have a chat about being single and how even if you're single, it's important to have that sense of sexual aliveness and sexual desire. There's a sense for us as women, I'll speak to women first of all, there's a sense as women that our sexual aliveness fuels our magnetism, it fuels our sensitivity, our receptivity, it fuels some of the spark in our body. So when we cultivate sexual desire through self-pleasure practices, it supports a stronger sense of embodiment, it supports our magnetism, so it has us then shine more in the world. When a woman loses that connection to her sexual desire, to her body, to her sexual pleasure, she can start to feel a little dull and lacking in magnetism. Women will often feel like they're not being noticed by men. And this can increase with age, that sense of not being noticed. And women often put it down to age. However, a sexually alive woman will be noticed by men no matter what her age is, because her magnetism glows and speaks for her. So, sexual aliveness, being connected to our desire, using self pleasure and self pleasure practices to nourish and fill up our bodies, has us be more vibrant in our womanliness and can be incredibly supportive for single women. For sexual men, single men, it's important for single men to connect with their desire in a healthy way. I find one of the traps that can happen for single men is that single men will shut down their sexual desires so that they appear non-threatening to women. But when a man shuts down his sexual desires, as well as appearing non-threatening, that's often the place from which a man ends up very quickly in the friend zone. Because if a man's not connected to sexual desire or sexual energy in his body, then a woman doesn't feel him as a sexual being. And when a woman doesn't feel a man as a sexual being, then she drops into that place of familiarity, comfort, and beginning to relate to him in the same way she would relate to a girlfriend. So let's say if I look at a dating example of a man and woman out for dinner and they're just getting to know each other, if the man has suppressed and shut down his sexual desire, there'll be no sense of electricity between the two of them. Just as I said, the woman's sexual energy contributes to her magnetism, the man's sexual energy contributes to the sense of electricity that comes from him, that sense of uh, electricity is really the best word for it, but that presence that's a little charged. And if you're sitting there on a date with a man and he has that sense of electricity and aliveness in his body, that's something that a woman can respond to. Whereas when a man has shut that down and he's only relating to the woman from his head, then there's nothing for her to respond to. If anyone can relate to what I've just shared there, I'd love to hear your comments. Do feel free to type that into the chat box. Angela says, so it's from the practice. I think Angela's comment from the practice was connected and felt the need to direct that incredible sexual power. I have been redirected to healing other parts of myself and feeling respected for taking notice of this. It's a way of healing. Absolutely, Angela. Connecting with our sexual energy and our sexual desire and using that for healing is a beautiful thing to do. Nina says, self-care as part of self-pleasure has helped her so much for herself and for experiences with partners. Nina also says she's experienced the friend zone, and she kind of thought it was her own fault that she sees men that way. As women, part of our responsive nature, our receptive nature, is that we need something to respond to. So if a man walks into a room going, I'm not sexual, I'm not sexual, I'm not a threat. And you can't see my hands, but I'm pretending I'm a man who's like, denying his sex. If a man's denying his sex, then there's nothing to respond to. Whereas when a man is comfortable in his sex and comfortable in feeling desire through his body, then it's much easier for a woman to be able to respond. And there's a part in this for single people to know the difference between sexual suppression, sexually leaking, and finding a healthy balance in the middle. Because sexual suppression is like, I'm not sexual, don't look at me, I'm not sexual, don't pay any sexual attention to me. So that's the sexual suppression, is very much a contraction of the energy and a shutting down. Sexually leaking is a sense of, let's say, a man might look at a woman and start imagining himself, having sex with her. Start imagining, just as he initiates a conversation, he might already be imagining what it would be like to have her naked, to have her, in his bedroom, to be having sex with her, and what positions he might like to have sex with. So that kind of forward fantasizing is sexual leakiness. It's a sexual projection. It's moving things forward in such a way that is not healthy or respectful. And it's often that kind of sexual leakiness that can cause the other person to go, ugh, something doesn't feel right here. And women do it as well. There are times when women meet men and go, oh, I can't wait to get his clothes off, or I can't wait to do this or that with him sexually. But that kind of sexual fantasy and projection and thinking forward is a sexual leakiness. It's not holding our sexual desire, it's not containing our sexual desire, but it's making the other person in some ways responsible for our sexual feelings. So we don't want to move from sexual suppression to sexually leaking. We want to find what that middle ground is. And the way I see it, the middle ground is being able to feel and hold and cultivate that sexual energy in a healthy way, such that I can move it and circulate it through my body. And going back to the example of single men or single women, as a single woman meets a single man, if she's connected to her sexual desire in a healthy way, she can let those feelings be present and travel through her body without hiding them, but without projecting them. Equally, a single man could be walking down the street and he could see a woman that he feels drawn to, and he could smile at her, and he could even say, "You look beautiful." And he could do that in such a way that he's not leaking, he's not expecting or demanding anything of her, he's not putting his needs onto her, he's simply expressing, "You look beautiful." And in that moment, being present to the desire in his body. And in being present to the desire in his body without making it about her, he's being contained. So then the woman feels free and she feels safe. So this is the way that we can, men and women, when people are single, can feel sexual desire without throwing it onto somebody, but also without shutting down. One of the things that women will commonly do is that when a woman throws her sexual energy around, a woman's way of leaking that sexual energy might be that she walks into the room and she's looking around to see who's checking her out, to see who's noticing her, and almost trying to hook or pull men's energy towards her. So that's more of a woman's way of being leaky with her sexual energy and sexual desire rather than self-contained with it. Okay. How do people relate to that experience of being contained in your sexual desire, being able to really embody and contain that sexual desire rather than suppressing it or leaking it? Does that make sense to people? I'm sure we've all felt the difference at certain times of feeling times when somebody's just completely shut down and not available sexually, or we've felt that feeling of somebody's sexual energy and desire almost being like an attack and something that's thrown on us, and men and women can both do that. But how relaxing and how freeing is it when somebody simply embodies their desire, and then you can be free to respond to that in a clean way. Greg says yes. Melissa says definitely. Chop says love the explanations of both. Thank you. Danny relates to the shutting down. Yeah, yeah, okay, excellent. I'm glad it's making sense for people. Yeah. And when we give ourselves permission to feel and embody our sexual desire, then there's more energy, there's more magnetism, there's more electricity, there's more responsiveness. There's also much more honesty available. Like if I think back to being single, whenever I was around men who were shutting down their sexual energy and uh, trying to be non-threatening, something always felt incongruent. Something always felt a little bit false to me, like there was too much trying or too much pretending. And then I didn't feel safe when I could feel that pretense. Equally, when I felt men projecting their fantasies onto me, that didn't feel safe. But if I was around a man who was connected to his body, connected to his sexual desire, and a man who could even communicate in a clean way from his sexual desire, then I was free to respond. And the response could be a yes, or it could be a no, or a I'm not sure, or I'd like to get to know you a little bit more. But there's much more space when somebody is clean and honest and embodying their sexual desire. Nina says she's been shut down. She doesn't think she leaks it, but mostly manages to contain it well nowadays. Yeah. Excellent. So, moving on from the examples of being single to looking at relationships, one of the things, and I'll speak to women first of all, one of the things I notice with women in relationships is that because they haven't, a lot of women don't understand that sex is for both the woman and the man. Sex is not just a man's thing. In actual fact, when a woman is sexually open, she will often want more sex than the man. Um, but there's a lot of women that, because we don't understand sexual openness, we haven't experienced it, and we don't know how to cultivate it, there's a lot of dialogue about sex in our society, that sex is a man's thing, that sex is about what the man wants or needs, and quite often a man's desire for sex is stronger because of his relationship to testosterone, but also because a woman just hasn't been supported to know how to open up sexually, and that sexual aliveness is for her just as much as it is for the man. Just check the comments again. Angela says, this is going back to the part about being single. Angela had that empowered sensation during dinner with a man. He eventually became vulnerable. Sherry says she used to be super leaky. The good thing now is that she has a sharp radar for other people's leakiness, and she can keep herself safe from it now. Nina says she used to live with the idea of sex being for the man. Angela says when the man became vulnerable, he broke down. Did he feel sexually vulnerable, Angela? I'm not quite sure what the why he broke down. Perhaps he wasn't used to being around women who are empowered. I'm not sure. Okay, so to come back to women in relationships shutting down or becoming disinterested in sex, and I often have men clients say to me, my partner's just not that interested in sex. She doesn't have a very strong desire, and my response is generally along the lines of most women are longing to open, even when they're shut down, there will still be a longing to open. And if we go back to the example before of if this is sexual range and capacity up in between these two parts of my hands, if this is sexual range and then sex is only happening in this very physical range, then a woman ends up just closing her body down. So in a long-term relationship, when a woman doesn't know how to open herself, she doesn't know how to support her partner to open her, and that longing gets shut down, in all women I've worked with, there's still a longing to reopen. So if you can hold in your awareness that even a woman who has shut down has a longing to reopen. So then it's a matter of like, what's the key to reopen? If you're a woman in a relationship watching this, start to be curious about what's the key for you to reopen. How do you need to be touched? How do you need to move your body? How do you need to create your own pleasure? And if you're a man in a relationship with a woman who has shut down, apply that same curiosity. What does she need to reopen? What does she need to feel sexual again? How can you touch her in ways that remind her of that innate longing, that tap into that deeper, essential feminine part of her? Because when a woman remembers that longing inside, when she remembers that part of her that longs to open, then she will want more sex. She'll want more intimacy in the relationship. What can happen is that sometimes women, when they've been shut down in their relationship, though they may experience randomly receiving sexual attention or flattery outside of the relationship, which kind of propels her back to remembering that she's a sexual being. And then she's like, oh, how could I bring that energy back to the relationship? So that can even be another way that I've seen this play out. But for the men who want to open your partners up again, ask yourself, how could you touch her differently? How could you touch her without demand, without expectation? When a man expresses his desire for his partner without expectation, without need, then she's much more free to respond. A man who is still inside, connected to his sexual energy, connected to his desire, who looks at his partner and goes, I want you naked right now. Take your clothes off and come lie down here with me. If a man does that in a way that is commanding, connected to his stillness, and doesn't have any sense of need, but it's actually he's speaking in such a way that he's using his desire to support her opening, a woman will respond to that. Whereas if a man says to a woman, if the man says, "Oh, I really, I need sex. I want sex. I want you to get your clothes off." And if he's like all hungry and needy in that, or full of expectation in that, then he's much less likely to get a response from his partner. But if he's clean and commanding and like, "I want you naked right now, and I want you lying here beside me. I want to touch you. I want to make love to you. I want to be with you right now." And if a man speaks all of that from his masculine depth, presence, and stillness, a woman is going to love and respond to that in beautiful ways. How many of the men who are listening have experienced that when you speak from your depth, your presence, your love, and your stillness, a woman responds in a much more open, appreciative, and juicy way to you? Chops says she really feels the difference in opening to a man who asks that cleanly. Yeah. And one of the things, particularly women with children, often feel that when a man's sexual desire has a lot of hunger in it, then a woman will often feel like the man's sexual desire feels like the attention of her child, like needing her, wanting something from her. So it's something else that she has to give. And if a woman in a relationship feels like she has to give that to make her partner happy, to make sure he's okay, then when she feels that she has to give that or she has to do that for him, it starts to fall into the category of feeling like a chore. Whereas when the man is holding and embodying his own sexual desire and energy, then the woman's body it just opens, it goes into that place of relaxing and opening, because she's not being asked to do something for him. He's like, "I'm here, I've got you." And so he's feeling into and opening her even with his words. Danny says he's experienced that, but finds it a struggle to get the words right. Yeah, and it can be a challenge when it's a new skill set. So it's certainly something to practice with. Even in the mirror, you might try going, "Come over here. I want to give you a huge kiss right now, and I need you to sit beside me." And doing that in a way that you're connected to the stillness, the depth, the presence, the love inside. It's like, "Oh, of course I want to go sit beside him." But yeah, you can practice it anything from like, "Come and sit beside me. I want to give you the biggest kiss ever," through to, "Take your clothes off. I want to make love to you right now. Take your clothes off. I want to rub my hands over your whole body." So that way, also when a man brings it in such a way that he's offering to her, he wants to give to her, so then the woman, it's like she can open, she can receive. It invites that receptive part. Danny says self-pleasure. So that, yes, definitely using your self-pleasure to build up that internal energy, to be able to feel sexual desire, stillness, depth inside. That can be a really great practice for building it up internally. Chops says it doesn't even have to be with words, just the action of taking me from that clean energy is very opening. Absolutely. When a man approaches his partner with embodied desire rather than okay, sorry, Danny was making a joke with me, so I didn't get what he meant by self-pleasure, but okay, that was a joke. Okay, but yes, you can definitely practice saying out loud, yeah, any of the commands, using the mirror, and so on. But anyway, I'm going to leave that there. And Angela says to do this without attachment. Exactly. And go back to being able to approach a woman even without words when a man is embodying his desire and clean that he's not taking anything from his partner, but he's approaching her with his desire in order to connect, in order to feel her, in order to support her opening. When he approaches in that way, and he can be quite commanding, quite direct in his approach and taking her in his arms, then it creates space again for the woman to open, creates space for that. So in a relationship, one of the most important factors is being able to express desire without demand, desire without expectation. For men to know that your partner is not responsible for your sexual needs. If you're making your partner responsible for your sexual needs, then you're actually creating um, an imbalance in the polarity. Because if somebody is responsible for your sexual needs, then there's a sense of being dependent on them. So if you want more sex than your partner, then use self-pleasure. Use your own practices for moving sexual energy in your own body rather than expecting your partner to fulfill every desire every time you have an urge or a need or a want for sex. So that way, the more you connect and you're able to feel and be with your own sexual energy, then you actually can become more and more attractive to your partner. Whereas if there's always an expectation that your partner meets you in a certain way sexually, or that your partner's available every time you feel horny, or that you become crushed every time your partner says no to you, if those things are happening, there's too much pressure, there's too much dependence on your partner to give you something. So if you're dependent on your partner to give you something, the energy's not moving freely, cleanly, and openly. So to kind of summarize on the sexual desire in relationships topic, two of the things that I see as being really of key importance for people in relationships is for women to start to reclaim sexual aliveness as part of your aliveness for life. And for men in relationships to begin to express your desire, whether it's through your body, whether it's through your words, but to be able to express that without need or demand. And then there'll be much more space for a sexual connection that takes you deeper and deeper. You'll be able to go into some of the spiritual, energetic, and emotional depth sexually. And going into those places sexually then means that the desire for sex is likely to come back much quicker. However, sex ends is often an indicator for how soon it will be that a woman in particular wants sex again. So if there's a lot of energetic, emotional, that deeper sense of connection in the sexual experience, it's highly likely a woman will want sex sooner. Whereas if the sex was purely physical and just dancing in that top part of the range, then it may be a longer period of time before she desires sex again. So I hope this helps and gives you some tools and some things to work with around whether you're single or whether you're in a relationship, how you dance with sexual desire, how you start to have a more clean, healthy, and embodied experience of sexual desire. I will hang out here for a few more minutes, so if you have any questions, drop them into the chat box. Yeah, there's a comment here from Yale. We tried doing intimacy dates, but even if Sean's energy and desire was clean, I struggled to trust that his motivation was authentic and genuine because it was scheduled. So, okay, that's an interesting one, Yael. What is it in you that is not trusting Sean? That's what I'd be curious to have a look at, because even though it's scheduled, the fact that it's a scheduled intimacy date doesn't mean that he's there out of obligation or expectation. It's like, yes, it's scheduled, but he can still desire you. He can still be authentic and genuine in that. So I'd be curious to have a look and see what's going on for you around the topic of trust, and what was going on for Sean during those intimacy dates. Was it that he was distracted? Was his energy somewhere else? Is there something that perhaps needed to be spoken about or cleared between the two of you? It feels like there's something else possibly sitting underneath it. Yeah, feel free to send me a message and give me some more detail around that, because I feel like perhaps there's something else going on. But yeah, thank you for asking that, and I would be curious to know what else was at play. Nina says she just had the thought, how much is too much when it comes to sexual desire? I mean, really, that's and very much an individual thing. Like high sexual desire in one person might be low sexual desire in another person. The important thing is that you're not making the other person responsible for your high level of sexual desire. So if your sexual desire is higher than your partner's, then using self-pleasure and self-care practices to take care of that, rather than expecting your partner to take care of it. But if you both have really high levels of desire, then beautiful. That's something to share and enjoy. Angela says, authentic and genuine are such liberating words relating to sex. Very, very true. Jonathan says, thank you, Martina. Loving these date nights. Lots of great takeaways to think about and practice. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so I just want to remind you about our upcoming events. On July the 4th and 5th, we have Relationship Tools for Men Level 1. And that's an online 2-day event. We have 4 sessions over the 2 days, so it's 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., both Saturday and Sunday. Rod and I will both be leading the Relationship Tools for Men Level 1. And men who've done the Level 1 work with us before have found great capacity to develop their presence, to come into stronger alignment, to know how to bring these tools and skills into their relationship and start to have deeper, more meaningful, more authentic connections. So I highly, highly recommend the Level 1 for men on July 4th and 5th. If you're interested to book for that, visit tantricblossoming.com. Also, our Blossoming Woman Level 1 is coming up July 18 and 19. Times are the same. It's a Saturday and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. And in the women's one, we look a lot at understanding the openness of our feminine body, being more in touch with who we are as women, how to express ourselves, and how to bring those things forward more fully into our relationships so we can have a higher quality of love, sex, intimacy, and relationship. And again, you can book for that at tantricblossoming.com. The date night for singles is coming up the last Saturday of June, and that's 2.5 hours for singles with some dating tips, opportunity to meet other singles and to do some energetic practices and have some beautiful conversations. Danny says he highly recommends Level 1. Thank you, Danny. Thank you. And Sherry says, thank you, Martina. So I'm going to sign off for now, and if you have any other questions about sexual desire, do feel free to send me an email or send me a message, and I'll address those next week. It's been beautiful to share with you all tonight, and thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday night.